Hello and welcome to another step-by-step how to tie tutorial video. This is what I'm calling the Northern Lights Flashbang. This is tied on a Moonlit ML 057. It's a 1x strong, 3x long, size 2. I am using a Danville's 210 denier waxed thread. Under all this fun flash, we do have some weight. I am using a 0.035 lead wire. And for the body material, we are using a turquoise and black Northern Lights, a olive green and yellow Northern Lights material. Inside the body, we have a little bit of red Northern Lights. And then a little bit of additional body material. I have H2O multi-mix flash. This is the frog. That works really well together. So let's go ahead and remove our sample and we can secure our blank hook in the vise. Make sure that's nice and flat. And like all good flies, this will begin but with a single wrap of thread. We'll get that started. And we can come in with our wire. What I'm going to do with this wire is I'm going to tie this in on either side of the shank of the hook, nice and carefully. Full length from the front to the rear, leaving a little space up front behind the eye. Don't want to crowd that. Work our thread forward, and we'll tie in the other side. With just the right amount of tension, you can get it to stay right where we want it. Make sure that's nice and level. And before we go too far, I've got the piece of lead wire on either side of the shank of the hook, nice and level, and I'm going to come through and I'm just going to add a little saturation of crazy glue. Really let it soak into the lead wire and the thread holding that all in. We're going to come through and wrap over the glue and the wire with our thread. Nice close touching wraps, really working that in there. We'll go from the rear to the front, take a couple of turns, shift gears, and we'll just take a moment, spin our thread counterclockwise or anti-clockwise depending on your region. We'll continue these thread wraps nice and flat, nice and tight, working our way all the way to the bend of the hook now. Excellent. Here we can tie in our first piece of body material. This will also be our tail. So this is that turquoise and black Northern Lights material. We're just going to take a small little piece, maybe a coffee straw's worth as far as diameter. I'm going to take that, we're going to fold that in half. We're going to trim our loops. Alright, we're going to tie this in 1 hook's length, facing the rear. A couple of tight locking wraps. I'm going to lift this all up and I'm going to bump my thread forward about halfway through that fly. I'm going to continue securing in the Northern Lights, start my thread wraps towards the rear. About halfway back, I'm going to take this piece that's facing forward, I'm going to fold that back and around the hook carefully. And this will give me a double tail here at the bend of the hook. So I have a nice long piece and then I have some shorties hanging out in the back. Give it a little bit of added dimension and a little extra body. Next we're going to come in with our red Northern Lights. This will be our inner body. And again, I'm just going after a small little sparse section. Get that trimmed off. Perfect. Alright, we're going to tie this in full length by the tips we just cut off. A couple tight locking wraps. Excellent. Now at this point we can just bring our thread forward, Really locking everything in, and we're going to just take a little moment, build a little ramp off of that flash on top, and we'll work our thread all the way forward. Now we could palmer on our red Northern Lights material, taking touching wraps, working our way from the rear to the front, covering the whole body. Little step, slip that down, and go all the way to the front. Excellent. You can secure that down. It's going to take a couple of wraps and fold the material onto the bottom side and secure that in towards the rear. And I bump back onto that lead just a little bit. We'll trim that off about the length of the hook. So we have that little kind of cut gill section underneath there. Next we're going to come in with the H2O multi-mix flash. This really has a lot of color in it, green and gold. So we're just going to take a small section and we'll trim that from the clump. Fold that all over once, and we'll trim our loops. Alright. Next we can tie this in. I want to tie this in full length of the fly on top, almost, if not into the tail. We're going to take a couple of tight locking wraps, securing that down, and just like how we did that tail, I'm going to fold this front portion back and kind of encourage it down and around the sides as we tie this in. Get a nice pinch on that. There, got that spread around there a little bit now. So we have some added dimension. We have the long fibers going all the way to the rear, and then we got some shorter fibers hanging out towards the back end. Alright, last but not least, let's go ahead and tie our last clump for our head. Go back to that turquoise and black. Again, I'm going for a sparse section. It doesn't take much for this fly because we're going to fold everything over once. And trim our loops. And multiply our material by dividing it. Alright, I'm going to lay this back section down, full length of the shank of the hook, approximately to the bend. We'll take a couple locking wraps, and I got my thread directly behind the eye of the hook. That's going to be critical for the fold over. And last but not least, let's come in with our olive green yellow Northern Lights. This will be our belly. And you guessed it, another sparse section. Doesn't take much. Give that a trim. And I want this to be a little bit shorter, so right off the get-go, I'm just going to come in and trim a couple inches off right off the top. Fold that over in half, and you guessed it, we'll trim our loops. And this is our underneath section, so we're going to line the part facing towards the rear initially. That's going to line up right with the shank, or the tip of the hook rather. And we'll just take a couple tight locking wraps, or soft wraps, get it into position. What we're looking at here is the piece that's facing towards the right, because this is what's going to fold back. And I'm satisfied. Last but not least, one last little drop of crazy glue. I'm going to introduce this right to the thread. One nice little droplet. Let that soak in there for a half a second. And we'll do a couple more tight locking wraps into that glue. And we're going to trust that crazy glue to do its job. And we're not even going to bother with the whip finish or anything like that. We can just trim that off. That glue is going to hold everything down nice and tight. Alright, last but not least, let's go ahead and fold our hair back. Fold this flash back, make sure we keep a nice clean eye. What I'll do sometimes is I'll take my hair packer and I'll just give it a little compression towards the rear. Make sure we get a nice clean eye. It's looking good so far. Up front, I'm going to give a little squeeze with the flat side of my scissors. Compress that thread down a little bit and get ready to receive the eyes. And what I'm going to do to hold my hair down, my flash, my body, I'm going to come in with my hackle pliers and just give that a little pinch. I don't want to hold it down too tight. Alright, let's come in with our eyes. This time I'm going to come in with a little bit of gel control glue. And we'll do a little dab of glue right about that eye position. And I have a green holographic stick-on eye. We'll just put that right up front. A little compression on there. And we'll flip it over and repeat on the same side. Again, just a little dab of glue, gel control. Doesn't take much. Let's go ahead and get our second eye off of the sheet. And we'll just go ahead and stick that on. And give it a little compression. We'll release our hackle pliers. Get things where they want to naturally rest. And last but not least, we're going to tame the front end down a little bit using some Loon UV Thin. We're going to come in right between the eyes. And we're just going to let that saturate in there just a little bit. I don't want to go too bananas with this. I don't want to overdo it. Give it a zap with the ultraviolet light. And we'll repeat the process underneath. And this will just kind of keep the flash material from folding forward. This just kind of works kind of more like a hairspray or a hair gel. We're not building a body up or anything with it. We're just using the resin to hold the hair back. Alright, I think that about wraps that up. So there you go. There you have it, folks. That is a size 2. It's what I'm calling a Northern Lights Flashbang. Thank you for watching. Happy tying, and with this one, tight lines.